Right, so it's 11 o'clock, and ready to get this going. This is all a bit of a new adventure for us, so please bear with us if there's any kind of problems with the tech or anything, and do shout. The best way, if you haven't got the Ring Central app downloaded and you want to ask questions, the easiest thing to do is just to email me. So that's jc@martenandco.com, martenandco.com. And I'll just answer those questions at the end if I can. If you have got the app downloaded, you can ask a question by raising your hand. It's a sort of little thing, and then it sends me an alert and I can get to it. So the idea is that we're going to talk through the news of the week, and then I'm trying to sort of make it a bit sort of thematic. So if I can just move the screen on, and then half back on there. There we go. So obviously loads going on because of the whole COVID-19 situation, and plenty going on in the background. I just thought one of the things that I wanted to pick up on was what's going on with the CLO funds. We've got an interesting situation here because the way they're all governed by a whole set of rules. And one of the things that they mustn't do is have too much exposure to CCC rated debt. And in light of what's going on, the rating agencies are busily downgrading things left, right, and centre. So which is there are two issues there. One is under CCCs for the CLOs, and one is under triple Bs for other normal debt investors. But we'll come back to that. So for the CLO funds, they have a maximum exposure they're allowed to have to CCCs, and if they go past that, they have to redress the situation by locking the income that they're getting off the underlying portfolio within the structure until the problem is rectified. And so that basically means that CLOs have to stop paying out income. And I think I had some data. So I think 30% of US CLOs are already in trouble on this measure, according to Bank of America. So the upshot of that is that Fair Oaks Income and Volta both said we're going to have to stop paying dividends for the moment, and it's going to be a while, I think, before they're able to. I have a long history with the predecessor of Fair Oaks, and back in the crisis, the share price of GLI dived to a couple of pennies just because people were worried that the whole thing was completely bust. What we don't know, I suppose, is what's going to happen with the underlying loans. So obviously, the margins on credit have really spiked upwards, not surprising, but it's how the governments and the central banks are going to actually interfere with the market and prop things up. That's how we have to wait and see how it's going to play out. It might be that very few things end up going bust, so we'll just have to wait and see. Sort of coupled with all of that, we've seen dividend suspensions this week, more and more of them. The big one is obviously the UK banks, and the story this morning was that they sort of were drag kicking and screaming to doing this, because obviously the idea is that the government wants the banks to lend to companies to stop them getting into trouble. Okay, this just creates a problem down the line, as far as I can see. And we've seen a lot of companies already coming out saying we don't think we can pay our dividend. So the ones I've got examples there, Hammerson, where they were struggling to collect the rents, and I think it was something like 37% or something of their rents that they wanted actually came in on the day. Empiric Student Property, which I did think wouldn't be that affected, but they've turned around to the students that rent the things and said you don't have to pay your rent for the final term, and at most that could cost them about 21 million quid. And obviously what we don't know is what's going to happen with the next academic year that starts in September, October. They did see that bookings were running ahead of what they were for the current academic year, so it did look okay, and that everything was getting back on track, and the dividend was almost covered in the, but now it's really been slammed by what's been going on. Dr. Peters, DPA, that's the fund that owns 4 Boeing 787s and leases them out. 2 of the planes are leased to Norwegian and 2 to Thai Airways. Norwegian has simply not paid its lease payment, the one that was due just recently. And that creates a real problem for DPA because obviously it's got to service the debt that it took out to buy these planes in the first place. I'm writing something on a minute for Citywire on this actually, but basically it looks as though the debt is split in 2. So one bank has financed the Norwegian planes and another bank has financed the Thai planes. And it could be that one of those goes and the other one's okay. What Thai are trying to do is actually sell and lease back more of their fleet. So I can't see that they can do that if they're going to stop paying the lease payments on DPAs. So it kind of implies that at least half of DPA's portfolio is okay, but we'll wait and see. And the last one on there is SEBA, the Cuban Property Fund. I don't know, maybe one that not many people have heard of, but I think this is a great little company. And actually it shows what happens when you've been under pressure and the threat of sanctions and everything else for such a long time. Something like this, you think would knock it for 6 because a lot of its investments are in hotels and things related to tourism in Cuba. And obviously that's dried up. But actually, it's got virtually no debt. It's got a lot of cash within the shells that hold the various hotels. And it's probably one of the best property companies close to weather the storm, but we'll see. Linked to all of that and what happened with the banks, we've got to see what Polar Capital Financials is trying to extend its life at the moment, and the big vote for that is any minute now. Its point is that although its share price and the bank's share prices have dived, actually, when in all of this, the banks are in a better place than they were in the financial crisis. And it's going back to this sort of whole triple B problem. A lot of the debt that's been taken out since the financial crisis has been actually done in the leveraged loan market. And that's simply because the banks weren't lending, because they were being forced by the regulators to rebuild their balance sheets and subject to stress tests and all that sort of thing. So banks haven't been doing most of the lending. It's been happening in this leveraged loan market. A lot of things were done covenant light, and they were structured to be kind of triple B rated, which is just in investment grade territory. And that area of the loan market's just ballooned. And it's going to be really interesting to see, again, subject to what happens with the government interference, how this plays out, because the owners of the loans now are going to have real trouble trying to sort them out because they're cover light. So we'll wait and see what happens. But for banks should be better placed. The share price has been hit for 6. I think it'd be crazy to wind up PCF2 now, but there we go. We'll wait and see. A couple of the funds have been trying to sort their debt out in all of this, and actually that seems to be ticking along quite nicely. I haven't seen anybody yet who's experienced a problem in terms of sorting the debt out. So Aberdeen just ran, I think it was just extended for a year. The one that really made a share price move was the BMO Real Estate, where they announced they got new funding and the share price soared upwards. I wasn't really thinking that it was in trouble, but obviously some people were. Just a few of the other things I thought just to highlight here. The things that deliberately went out and focus on quality and focus on cash flow and focus on strong balance sheets are doing okay. So I've mentioned Smithson here. Another one like that we actually cover is Strategic Equity Capital. Same idea basically. If you're not stressed in terms of your balance sheet, then you are sort of performing a little bit better. We've seen, because of the SQN problems, which we finally saw the SQN came out and announced what its NAV was in the wake of the anaerobic digestion write-downs. So that I think the NAV's gone into the 70s, and knocking about 20p off it, or 22%. That's a big hit. No wonder really that the board lost patience and looking for a new asset manager. That would leave SQN with the secured income fund being its only listed fund, and I think the board of secured income are going, we've got a reasonably good fund here that isn't really subject to what comes with COVID and running into problems. We can be in a much better place. We can much like be in a place where people bid us the benefit out and achieve us more money. So we'll wait and see what happens to that. Aberdeen Japan had a clause that said if it traded at too wide a discount, it'd have to offer a continuation vote. So it's going to have to do that. It would surprise me if it failed that. But we have this weird situation where people might be desperate for cash. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. But yeah. And obviously, in terms of conserving cash, PRS REIT is one of the companies that come out and said basically this is going to stop investing for the moment. So it did have about 3,000 houses under construction. I suppose construction has been suspended on most of those, and it's actually probably not too bad. It was one of the ones that I was a bit worried about the size of its loan to value, but actually, they haven't spent the money yet, so it should be okay. And there is sort of normal stuff going on. So I suppose deals that were in the pipeline for a while have now been done. So JLEN's bought another anaerobic digestion plant up in Scotland, fueled by chicken manure. And UNI, which is a property company that our property analyst Richard really likes, has just sold a science park in Hywel, Oxfordshire. And for booking a decent uplift on that. So there's stuff going on, but I do think all complicated M&A deals like that, they're going to start dry up a bit as people struggle to work from home and do the same things that they used to do. Duke, yeah, that's sort of the same story as before. The Toro one, just as a bit of a laugh at the end, they had to adjourn their AGM because nobody voted, which I thought was just crazy. I think it just shows you that people are looking the other way and just not on top of things. Yeah, it's all very peculiar times, and hopefully not for much longer, but we'll see. So that's the end of that. And now, if I can get the technology to work, we'll see if we've got any questions. So let's see first if I've got any on the email. Not at the moment. So if you want to ask a question through the app, then just raise your hand, and I should be able to spot those. And if you want to ask me, if you're just dialing in on the phone and you want to ask a question, just email me. I'll wait sort of a couple of minutes while we see whether you get anything. Here we go. I've got one question about what's going on with SEC. She says, can you tell us a bit more about developments with SEC? Is this a good move? So Strategic Equity Capital has announced that it's shifting its management contract from GVQ to Gresham House, which is the sort of investment boutique run by Tony Dorwood. Tony used to be actually one of the managers of SEC back in the when it was originally launched in 2005. So he knows the fund quite well. And Gresham already has a fund doing something quite similar to SEC called Gresham House Strategic. And my initial reaction was, well, are you going to knock the two funds together? But it turns out that actually Gresham House is much more micro-cap than SEC is. And so they're going to run the two things quite discreetly. We're not going to lose any continuity with the management of SEC because the two guys who actually run the fund, Jeff Harris and Evan Carnby, are actually going to move across to Gresham House. And the really good thing is that Gresham has done a deal, or is doing a deal with Aberdeen Standard, where they're going to basically, for this segment of what Gresham does, which is this strategic public equity, they're forming a joint venture, and the marketing machine of Aberdeen Standard is going to get put behind it. So that's going to be, yeah, that should be quite good news for SEC. And of course, what they want to do is drive the discount down and issue more stock. And the performance wasn't too bad before all this kicked off, so we'll see. Cool. So the next question I've got is about dividend reserves and income trusts. Can we expect a surge in buying interest? Will boards issue stock or allow premium to rise? Issuing stock means starting the income reserves, obviously. Yeah, exactly. Quite a few articles have been written in the past couple of weeks, and we've contributed to some about this issue about dividend reserves. And obviously, if you're an income investor and you're reliant on that income, and you're in an open-ended fund, you're about to see quite a big hit to your income, because they're going to be cutting their distributions as banks and the like suspend their dividends. We'd expect, though, that most of the UK equity income trusts will actually dip into reserves and maintain, or even keep increasing, because one of these things is the dividend heroes thing, that if you've got a record of whatever it is, 43 years or something of raising your dividend every year, you're not going to want to break that. And so we've been looking at some of the revenue reserves that these things have got, and generally they're enough to get through this, I think. And all these funds obviously have the option, if they want, of going beyond just dipping into the revenue reserve and actually paying out some capital. Not all of them will take paths to do that, but they do have that option. Given that, it would make sense for investors who want UK equity income to be holding it through an investment trust rather than an open-ended fund. Whether we actually see issuance, I think that's possible. Actually, there are quite a few of these things that are trading relatively close to asset value, or even at small premiums. So it is possible. But it is obviously, it's definitely a thing that you could see some dilution of that income reserve, which kind of reduces the attraction. But they haven't got this option to dip into capital. So I'd love it to be a big thing, that we see a huge flood of money into UK equity income funds. Somehow, I doubt it in this environment. But down the line, if we keep pushing this message that it makes more sense to hold UK equity in this way, then it's possible. So, anything else? Question here. So, income from UK equity income funds and property funds is under threat. What about renewable energy? Will they have operational issues should JLN have bought the new AD plan? It's funny because I've just been writing about SQN and all the problems it's got with AD. Anyway, let's go back to the first question. So renewable energy, obviously, is pretty much immune to all of this. There is the only thing that's really could affect them is that the power prices carry on going down, as we've seen a reduction in demand. But most of them have power purchase agreements in place. They've actually sold the power forward. And for funds like JLN, where the contribution of power prices to its revenue is actually relatively low, it shouldn't really be much of an issue at all. JLN's got a very good record with its anaerobic digestion plants. It's got quite a big portfolio of these things now, and they're getting up to be increasingly important. It's all about what they're doing, because they are relatively conservative people. It's about buying plants that are operational already, and you've got some track record of seeing how they cope. where SQN went wrong is it was funding the construction of new ones. And then, so when it turned out that the plant didn't quite work as well as planned, or it was much harder to get the hold of the feedstock than they thought it was going to, that was obviously a bit of a disaster. The new one that JLEN's bought, it's in Scotland. It's powered mostly by chicken manure, but some sort of vegetation. And it's been running for a long time. The only sort of interesting thing about it is that JLEN bought a small equity stake and then a larger debt piece. That seems to be a bit of a step away from what they've done before. So we'd expect them to say more about that when they next talk to shareholders. Oh, they're coming thick and fast now. So power prices, oil price going down so much. Do you see any change in power price? One of the big determinants of the power price in the UK is gas prices rather than oil prices. Yeah, and there obviously is downward pressure for now on power prices. So I don't expect that's going to go away. At the AIC sector level, where do you see the best risk-adjusted pricing for investment trusts? That's a good question. I think I need to do a bit more work on that and have a think. Definitely, we've been trying to look at sectors that really aren't much affected, and I wrote something recently about the stuff in the property residential sector, things like Civitas and Triple Point, where basically their income is more or less guaranteed by the government. And obviously you've got the same thing as renewables, same thing in infrastructure, but those things didn't need to go down. We had a big bounce back in the prices of renewable energy and infrastructure, though not so much in the social housing and that area. Maybe that could get a bit more. But across anything that's got sort of like a equity exposure, I am struggling to know what the true value is, because we're seeing an awful lot of volatility still. I don't think that's going away. I think that the impact of stimulus is actually fading a bit in terms of sentiment. And I think we're maybe creating a lot of problems down the line in terms of the amount of government debt we're going to have. So it's going to be interesting to see how that works. But I'm not confident piling into equity funds at the moment. What about healthcare and biotech is the next question, or other technology? Well, actually, healthcare and biotech's been quite a good defensive place to be. So looking at the performance, actually the one that's done best in all of this is international biotech, partly because that's a bit more conservatively managed than some of the other ones. There's obviously, it's much in demand in terms of trying to get a cure for this virus and everything else like that. There is some disruption to the sector. What Syncona said was that clinical trials are going to have to be postponed for now, because really hospitals have to just focus on just treating the virus. And even treating things like cancer patients, you're seeing that falling away as well. So there is a hit to some of the revenues of these funds, but other things are holding up well. So it is relatively defensive, I suppose, but not completely new. Tech, I think, is interesting because, well, even just doing this, there's way more stuff about working from home and conference calls and all sorts of other apps being used. And so tech seems to be, to me, quite a good place to be in all of this. And things like peril got hit quite hard, and I just think that's probably way overdone. Hang on a second, I'm just seeing. I think that's all the questions I've got at the moment. If there's nothing else, we should probably call it a day for today and talk about it and come back and talk about stuff for next week. So stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you all soon. Cheers. Bye-bye.